3. Okay, here we go. All right. Hi, Professor Curt Bonk. Okay.
Hello, Faridah. Good to have a chat with you this afternoon.
Right. A chat with between two colleagues, and I think a lot of my students in the L750 and the L630 class, all of them are going to enjoy this discussion. Several of them, actually, the ones who are on campus, are in your class or have been in your class. And I've got folks also joining us online. Several of them are teaching in the country, and others are teaching in places like South Korea, Italy. I can't remember.
South Korea too many times.
Yeah, we have a
Italy only once.
Yep. So we have a very diverse group, actually. Are you seeing me in a small thumbnail sort of thing, so that
I actually see you as the same size as me. That's the way I have this embedded in my screen. So
okay. It looks like that too on my screen. I'm just wondering what the students see. So, Professor Bonk, you are a highly recognized scholar in the field of distance education. I think Indiana University is very fortunate to have you in our midst. And I just want to show students some of the awards that you've been given. I know more are coming, but I want to kind of show them the awards. And so I think probably right now I've just closed that screen.
Good. We can skip that part.
We're talking about that screen, and so let me see. Maybe this is the one.
You can always share it with them later.
I will share them with them later. And so what I do want to say now is that the two most recent ones that you have gotten, one is from the Education Week, is the EduScholar Public Presence Rankings. And this is an award given in recognition for those contributing most substantially to the debate about schools and schooling. That's quite an honor.
It's a strange metric that they use in that. They combine your Google presence, your Clout score, your books you write, congressional records, newspaper reports, and your Google Scholar Index is a big part of that. And they combine that and more things into a score. And so they go through 20,000 academics studying in the field of education to come up with the top 200. I've been fortunate to get listed. It wasn't necessarily that I've done a lot of work in schools, which you would think from that contributing to public discourse in schools, that I would have a heavy footprint in K-12. But really, I've done more in higher ed, and previously I did a bit with the military and with corporates. It's really the publications that have gotten out there, and I've been lucky because coming in early into this field of online learning and distance learning and blended learning, as you did, 20 years ago, it got on everybody's radar. And so I had students wanting to do research on it. I had the whole business school, the Kelly Business School, their online MBA program, wanting research on that, and they basically funded everything. They were bringing in lots of new students at $60,000, $70,000 a student, and they wanted evaluation of quality. So again, by being early into a discipline or field, you can amass a lot of research in a short amount of time, but you have to be focused, you have to be good at planning ahead, and networking with people out there. And I think that's what I've been able to do, and have a cadre of young researchers here at Indiana who are eager to get published. I had many Chinese scholars who had finished their PhDs and just wanted to get some publications so they could get a job.
Wow. Well, I think sorry to interrupt, but I think you're making tremendous contributions there. And I think this goes along with your other award from the Association for the Advancement of Computing Education that gave you the award in recognition of outstanding leadership and service to the profession and AACE, the organization itself. So I think what you've just said, the recognition and the awards confirm them. So if I may, allow me to start asking you a few of the questions, because the class is indeed looking at online research, online teaching research. It's one part of a larger component of the class, which is looking at teacher education, research in teacher education and professional development, focusing specifically on language teachers.
Can I just pause for one second and say
Sure.
that award for AACE came about because of service. And in 1999, I went to my first Ed Media in Seattle, and I went over to I actually participated in the pre-conference. I got asked to help in the pre-conference. Mm-hmm. And I had a poster session available, and I talked to the founder, and he added me in at the last minute and had me do a poster. And I got it started that way, just a simple little poster, and sometimes it's just volunteering to do a workshop. Involvement in a conference can be very small, and it builds over time. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to help AAC create 2 new conferences, Global Time and Global Learn. And so that came later, and I got other people involved in it, doing becoming reviewers and on the board and writing mission statements. It really just started with a little poster session, just like the web, the World Wide Web started with a poster session. It was a rejected paper. In fact, the World Wide Web, I think, was a rejected paper. And Tim Berners-Lee got a poster or something. They said, oh, maybe we'll give you a poster. And here we have something that changed the world. So don't feel disappointed if you have a paper proposal changed to a poster, or if you don't have anything at all for a conference, still go if you can. Make those connections, because you never know where they're going to lead. Mm-hmm. I will say that volunteering to do workshops at several conferences and then no longer doing those workshops. I did them for a series of years, and I stopped, and people said, where's Dr. Bonk? How come he's not here? And then all of a sudden I started getting invites to come back. So get your foot in the door. Dip your toes in the water in some way, shape, or form. Make those connections, and it just grows over time. It doesn't happen magically, automatically. It just kind of develops. I keep telling people, someday maybe I'll become famous in this field. Someday maybe, and then it just kind of grows, and all of a sudden you're looking like, wow, you look back at all the things that have transpired, and, you feel fortunate that you were there early. So now look for what's coming that you can jump in on and provide a small contribution towards, and then see that grow 10 years from now or 5 years from now. That's my little tip. But
all right, fantastic. That's a great advice, Curt. And so that leads me to the first question. And so I was looking at your book, the way I've come up with these questions is that I've looked at your publications. And one of the first that I looked at was the 2006 publication by Bonk and Kim, and entitled The Future of Online Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. So what is the state of online learning and teaching at this point in time, 11 years after the fact? After that,
the first time I was on national television, or television of any kind, I was in New Zealand. And they had me on Channel 1 television. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Bean brought me there. The guy looked like Mr. Bean. He wasn't really Mr. Bean. I was going from the South Island to the North Island to get off the plane. And Mr. Bean gets me off the plane and says, you can be on national television tomorrow. And I said, sure. 6 a.m. you got to wake up, and I'm like, okay. I've been flying to New Zealand previously. And I get to this, and this is Hamilton, New Zealand. It was a branch of the television station from Auckland. So it was a remote site. I get there, no one's there, and then the Pro Vice Chancellor comes, and they put makeup on both of us an hour later, and we're waiting. Mm-hmm. After 45 minutes of the show, they finally come to Hamilton, and they asked me a question, and they had given me 3 questions to study for nearly 2 hours, and they asked me, what is the state of e-learning? It was not one of the 3 questions. I went, on national television, no less. And they went to the Pro Vice Chancellor, who worked with Margaret Thatcher for a bit previously, and he was smooth. They come back to me. They ask me a question on the list. I'm smooth, back and forth. I go back to the conference, and my friends were literally, laughing. So what happened to him? I get out of my taxi, and some guy comes into my taxi and looks at me and goes, you were on national television. And he starts laughing hysterically. And, I was pretty embarrassed. But they asked me the same question you just asked me. Mm-hmm. That was 2002. That was April 2002. I still don't have an answer for that question. Let's move on to what is the state of e-learning? So what we're seeing in e-learning is finally we move first from awareness of online learning, then comes resistance, then comes understanding what's possible, the third stage. Mm-hmm. Then, becomes actually doing something, then comes sharing what you've done, and then comes advocacy. in online learning space, we're over here in stages 4, 5, and 6 finally. We had the resistance stage for a decade. Now MOOCs and other alternative and derivatives of MOOCs are back at that stage 1 and 2. People are aware and resisting a little bit of application. But we'll see different forms of online learning come about. It might be called something else. So we don't even know what that is. So now MOOCs became the big jelly bean out there that everyone was trying to get understand. But to be honest, this will be cycles. We'll go through iterations, and we'll look at the outliers. People will look at the things that are unusual and say universities are going to be replaced or they're not going to be replaced. All these far out claims, they get us to think about the edges, but in the middle, there are millions of people whose lives are changing from blended learning by adding a piece of a course to having online components for maybe your tests, maybe your readings, maybe something else. So in 2006, we did a handbook of blended learning, looking at what's happening all around the world. 75 contributors doing 39 chapters in this book. And we have a chapter in Korea. You said Korea in there, South Africa and China and New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Mexico, so forth. There's lots going on all around the globe. Keeping a pulse on it is difficult. And so I've been trying in my research and in my writings to get people to do symposium. We're doing a symposium at eLearn a week from Tuesday on MOOCs in open education in the developing world. We have people coming the night before from Fiji and Thailand and China and Kenya and other parts of the world. The night before we start, and then during the day, we're going to have people from UNESCO and the Commonwealth of Learning and other places who will be talking about the developing world and what's possible today that wasn't possible a decade ago.
Can I interject there? And because the next question is related to that book, actually. And one of my areas of interest is looking at what you view as the what's happening with informal and formal learning, how e-learning is affecting that in terms of not just our teaching, but our scholarship as well, in our positioning as to the connection between the two. Can you respond to that really quickly?
Yeah, so there's a lot happening with informal today, and Jay Cross, God rest his soul, he died 2 years ago, he said 80% of learning was informal, and he may have been conservative, probably was. And so our scholarship today is starting to tap into those informal types of deliveries of learning. And in fact, my research has looked at 300 informal learning websites out there, like TED Talks, for instance, and other such virtual channels, video channels, but online education channels, free tutoring online, homework assistance online, just Wikipedia is another form of informal forms of learning online, but MedTube and TeacherTube, SchoolTube are video formats, but adventure learning on the internet, language learning, Live Mocha no longer exists, but there are many other Spanish cafes and so forth that you can learn Chinese online, Spanish, Italian, whatever. Language learning has exploded, and your field has been impacted by this a lot. And so we both are trying to understand how our students are learning through these informal channels with online study groups and support structures and Cliff Notes or whatever. But we also, as scholars, are moving in this informal space. And our scholarship today is in Twitter, and it's in Facebook, it's in academia.edu and ResearchGate and other social media formats and our blogs and our homepages. And so people are learning about us and about our courses that we might post our course contents, we might post our research articles, we might post our thoughts of what's happening in our blogs. There are many ways in which today we're adding to that informal learning space and giving students opportunities to learn outside the four walls of the classroom. Nutshell. But if you want to read more, I've got an article in the International Journal of Self-Directed Learning where we look at 320 informal learning resources and we look at the quality of them and other factors. We're looking at 8 different dimensions of them.
Right. We'll follow that up, actually, which sort of goes to my next question, which is based on your 2009 work with Zhang. I think it's Zhang, yeah? Is that how you pronounce her name? So, in essence, it's empowering online learning. What does that mean? Empowering online learning.
Yeah, Ka Jong. So, you know, that's another story. That was not the title of the book. This book goes through our read, reflect, display, and do model, what we affectionately know as the R2D2 model. And the publisher got worried that George Lucas would sue us if we had R2D2 on the title. So they wanted to change the whole model to the Verve model, which is what I never heard of, but our publisher was so worried about being sued that he changed our entire book, which happens a lot out there for all the watching in TV land. Verve stood for visual and, I don't know, experiential and reflective and blah, blah, blah. We didn't go with that. They talked to their attorneys. The attorney said, you just can't have R2D2 on the title. You can have it throughout the book. We had changed the entire book to the RRDD method. We had to change it all back to the R2D2. This will drive you crazy. So empowering online learning is really about a four-part model. Some people look at it as learning styles, but being a former educational psychologist, learning styles have flaws, many problems. We look at it as a problem-solving wheel, if you will. A decision-making wheel, if you will. And so there are four things that you can do: reading, reflecting, displaying, and doing in any kind of environment. And you don't have to start with reading, and you don't have to move to reflection or displaying or doing. You can go the other direction. You could start here. It was just one way of cutting through all the possibilities and trying to make sense of what's out there for people in the trenches who are teaching online or using online technologies to learn.
So the model specifically is looking at how is a teaching model.
It's a teaching model. It can be used as an instructional design model if you wanted to. We look at it as a way of addressing diverse learners. That was our goal. How can you address the diverse learners and learning environments that you have in front of you today?
So what's the answer to that? The model is the answer to that, but what is the philosophy on which it is based?
So one thing is to look at the activities that you're utilizing from the standpoint of that model. Are you only utilizing verbal activities? Are you only utilizing the visualization, or are you focusing much more on one quadrant than the other? So it's a way of getting you to meta-reflect on what you're attempting to do. And to think about the options for people who might have disabilities, special needs, that you might provide your content in different formats.
So it's like a UDLing, universal, akin to UDL.
It's akin to it. And we have a follow-up book with another 100 activities. That is the one critique that I made of these books. As soon as the second one came out, the universal design for learning became a hot topic, and I said to myself and others who asked, is there one flaw in this book? There are two flaws. One is the lack of a focus on purpose. And goal setting is one of the 10 principles in my Tech Variety book, but really the overarching goal, the mission, purpose that you have is embedded in here. It's not, or in this one, it's not explicit. The second is universal design for learning, really thinking about how these strategies can impact people with hearing disabilities or visual or physical or so forth. That's not explicit in the book. It's implicit. The model in here is implicit. Don't buy this book and expect that you're going to be seeing a lot of UDL types of models. Instead, download the free book.
Wow, okay.
At techvariety.com, TEC Variety, or no dash TEC. You can put TECH. You can misspell it. You'll still get it.
Well, I think you're going to get some folks doing just that right after this. And so
it's in Chinese too for any of you watching from China. It's available at that website in Chinese or English, and maybe soon Arabic. We're hoping that someone will. I've got someone who's got the book now who did a different book, My World is Open book. She translated to Arabic, and she made this one. Korean. My MOOCs book's in Korean for those of you in Korea.
Okay, actually that was my fourth question, because I was going to look at the pedagogical foundations underlining the activities that you listed in the Tech Variety book. So I think you've sort of talked about that. I do want to talk about the advances in pedagogy, and this is looking at your 2002-2003 work. When you talked about pedagogical online training, what do you mean by that? I mean, what are the advances in, pedagogical instruction in online?
The article, of course, started us towards this book. It took 15 years for this book to come out, basically. That was the initial inroads.
Mm-hmm.
So we were looking at what are motivational strategies that are utilized, or what does the research say on human motivation? And of course, feedback's an important element of motivating people, but whether it's peer feedback, self-feedback, expert feedback, system feedback. The second thing is tone or climate, having a safe, psychologically safe and comfortable.
What climate? Sorry, I missed that.
Tone or climate. Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers' notion of tone or climate. That's actually the first principle. You need that before anything else. You need to make it flexible, convenient, accessible content.
Mm-hmm.
And so the psychological literature from the humanists out there talked about a safe tone or climate. The behaviorists are talking about feedback issues, so are the cognitivists.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into the gaming people that talk about curiosity, fun, and games. That was the C in the tech variety model.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into other things like autonomy and intrinsic motivation and relevance or authentic learning environments. Tom Reeves from Georgia has a book about authentic learning in online environments, a close friend of mine. And then others talk about interactive and collaborative kinds of environments.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally we get into tension, and that's Piaget, cognitive dissonance. You want to get students to know they don't know something, so they are forced to learn more. And then finally, you need products. We call it yielding products. The Y in tech variety is product-based learning, project-based learning, doing something, creating something tangible you can walk home with.
Mm-hmm.
So we pride in these principles, and I didn't mention variety in there, but that's part of the tech variety model, of course. So the tech variety.
Could I bring in a comment that someone would make? I think I'm sure you've heard this before. They will say, well, those are things that you need to think about in any form of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
What's unique about online?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's so unique about online? In fact, what we hope happens is people teaching online, and I think we've seen some research come out that indicates that people who learn online transfer some of that to face-to-face settings. And so this book may be written for online, but I'm sure you could probably use at least half, if not 3/4 of the ideas in a face-to-face kind of environment or other kinds of environment. Part of the reason I self-published this book is the publishers, again, would have changed this book title around, I'm sure, would have changed the book, would not have published a book with 150,000 words. They would have cut a third to half of the book out. And so this is my way to contribute to the world. You can download any chapter, the chapter on engagement, the chapter on curiosity, which is the most downloaded those are the most downloaded. Engagement, curiosity, and tone or climate are downloaded a lot. There's also a chapter on the web links that are used throughout the book. So everything's a hot link. If you want to explore collaborative tools or mind mapping tools or screen capturing, there's a whole chapter that has every single link. And then with every single reference and a link to the ones that are available. We've tried to make this user-friendly. But you've got a good point. It's not a criticism that per se. It's more of an awareness that you can utilize a lot of these ideas in any kind of delivery mechanism. It just takes a little thoughtful tweaking, right? It just takes you to sit back, and the problem that teachers have is they don't give themselves license to sit for an hour and think. They're constantly moving from one thing to another. And if you just give yourself an hour to think about your goals and what you're attempting to do and explore the web a bit, look at these resources, it's amazing what you'll come up with.
Now, I'm going to push you a little bit more on that, because you said 3/4 of those things that you mentioned can be used anywhere. What's that 1/4 left over?
Well, I said at least 3/4. But one thing you probably couldn't do is something like a Wikibook. People were doing
Which
books.
fall under what category?
So a Wikibook would be difficult to do in a face-to-face only environment, because especially with our example of international Wikibooks, where students were working with other students in other universities, multi-institutional collaboration. It's possible with pen and paper, but it would take a long time.
But my question would be why? Why would we want to use Wikibook? Why is it pedagogically important?
Sure. And so I've written 2 papers on that. One that talks about the reasons, the principles behind it. And I'm happy to share. One thing is perspective taking. The real reason why many of us are educators in schools of education is to expand students' perspectives, to see beyond themselves. A Wikibook or a collaborative document in Google Docs or some other tool are ways to get students to see other points of view and other perspectives. There are also ways to force students to negotiate ideas and to collaborate on ideas. And in a Wikibook, you don't take ownership over anything. Your name is not on there in the end product. So you start seeing that it's the ideas that are important. It's not my ego invested in something that has my name only. Much of life when you graduate is a collaborative nature, and your name is not, it might be embedded on page 49 of a document or nowhere at all. So it gives you
have the versioning capability, right?
It's what's,
you have the versioning capability on
yes, you do. You can go back to previous versions and all that kind of stuff, and we studied that. We actually looked at people who are Wikibookians and asked them about the revisionary process and how they negotiate ideas and all that. And that's fascinating in and of itself, and how they revert back or don't revert back and the supports that they get. But what you start seeing in these environments is that students, even when it's done, will want to go back and add to what they've done, because it's available for a public audience. When the audience extends beyond the instructor, they take more time and they even refine it after they get their grade. And so graduate students, of course, want to get published and they want to grade and all that, but that's not the main goal of a Wikibook project, okay? The goal is to get ideas out for a global audience to utilize, tap into, expand, and to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd love to kind of have this discussion with you, because, you know, part of part of learning is ownership. And so having this shared sense, you know, it's sort of an interesting discussion as to where the line is, you know, because in order for you to move forward, ownership of what you're doing is incredibly important. And
when we ask Wikibookians and graduate students that question about ownership, 60 to 80%, somewhere in there, of Wikibookians said, nah, nobody owns it. 60, 80% of somewhere around that 3/4 of the graduate students said, we own it. So that there is that difference between you and I as academics and our graduate students who need our names on things, and the general public out there that isn't as concerned about that. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. I mean, it depends on the reward system, isn't it? As to what you're doing. And so if the reward system is just general sharing, I mean, and you are fulfilled by that, you know, we all would like to be fulfilled with that, but it's not always, you know, it's not always the reality that of most of us in jobs that, you know, require lots of recognition and lots of thinking on our individual parts. And so,
exactly.
Anyway, kind of going beyond that a little bit, I think the other thing that I sort of want to bring out also is your 2004 article on online education evaluation. This class actually started with program evaluation, and we listened to Chad Lockmiller and John Hitchcock as well, and to look at the various factors of evaluation in language teacher education programs. So with regards to that, what should we evaluate when we look at teacher education? I mean, what was the focus on that article that you co-authored with quite a few people, actually?
Can you tell me who are the co-authors?
Yeah, four co-authors. Yep.
So read the title again for me. I'll have to remember what that article is.
Online Education Evaluation. And your co-authors were Hugh, Leo, Martinez, Jian.
Yeah, you're gonna have. That was one I was a support person on in a minor role. They were graduate students of mine that co-opted me to go to a conference with them, AECT conference, and we had a symposium or a special session, and I'm on it with them. Who knows? I don't know if I'm first author, but that was.
You're fourth author.
Okay, I'm fourth. So my role in that was minor, and it lasted for about. That session lasted an hour, and after that, everything we said was gone from my brain. So that was.
Right now, actually looking back, you know, having the experience that you've had. If you do, I mean, you're asked to do this also, you know, I'm sure you're asked for letters to support people who are going up for tenure or promotion. If they're teaching online, you know, what do you look for? Or if you're looking at a new online program, you know, how would you evaluate them?
So I had a student, when I taught a massive open online class once, I had a music professor in the course who won awards for, he's got a Wikipedia page, he's got some musical score that he did that won some attention, and he asked me to look under the hood of his course. And so you're asking me to look, what would I do if I looked under the hood of these online instructors' courses? And what would I be looking for? What are the quality indicators out there if we were to create some kind of a scheme to evaluate online education? And you might be looking at a couple of things. In fact, there's a guy, Nishikant Sunwalker, younger brother of Luke from Star Wars. His real name is Nishikant Sunwalker, and he was an MIT professor, and he developed a scheme to look at online education and evaluate the components for the multimedia elements that might be embedded in it, the overemphasis on text versus having more visual kinds of possibilities embedded in it, the forms of feedback that students would get, the timing of that feedback. His email at the time was nish@mit.edu, N-I-S-H. I don't think he's at MIT anymore, so I don't think you'll find him there. I think he's left there.
Skywalker is his last name?
Yeah, Sunwalker.
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 Skywalker.
Yeah, not Skywalker, but Sunwalker.
Sunwalker. S-O-N or S-U-N?
Yeah, it's what?
S-U or S-O-N?
S-O-N, W-A-L-K-E-R. Nishikant Sunwalker. He goes by Nish. Anyhow, he developed a scheme for evaluating online contents and presented at the Wisconsin Distance Teaching and Learning Conference about at that time of that paper, maybe a year before that. And I found that fascinating. It was written up in Campus Technology or the Syllabus or some practical, you know, education journal or magazine at the time. And I think he was onto something, but I haven't seen much follow-up to these kinds of quality indicators. What we've seen come about is Quality Matters. And we've seen the online research consortium, online learning consortium, formerly the Bonk Consortium. I think those are two places in which if you're looking for quality indicators and want to understand it, Quality Matters is actually a website that you can go to and understand what are some of the key things, components of a high quality online course. Right. The other is you can become a member or even a non-member and subscribe to the Online Learning Consortium, which has a journal called Online Learning, which used to be called the Journal of Asynchronous Learning Networks, JALN. Very high quality journal and high quality people that go to that. There are conferences coming up in Orlando in November, in mid-November. They have a couple. They've merged with Merlot, which at least their conference has merged with the Merlot people, who have a website, a journal, a newsletter that has peer review of quality content. So if you go to merlot.org, you can tap into tens of thousands of free contents, anthropology to zoology, that has peer review. And you might be able to download, I'm not sure, but they have a peer review mechanism for their contents and what they're looking for in terms of ease of access to the contents, in terms of currency of those contents, in terms of multimedia components to those contents. Some of the things that might be looked at in the creation of your own online classes. Do you have a lot of reflection activities, interactive, collaborative activities embedded in those courses? I'll stop there.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these, we have, I think, someone in South Korea, Jim, who's actually is starting his own language teaching, online language teaching, shall I call it a business? You know, so but a lot of us, a lot of language teachers teach online. I myself am learning language via Skype, and so it's quite a phenomenon.
I tried Chinese via Skype about a decade ago when I was working on this book, The World is Open, and I have a story in this book about someone who's teaching me Chinese, but they had to cut half of the book, and that story got cut, so you probably never read that story. But I had this person in China teaching me Chinese via Skype, just like you. I learned a bit, not a lot, but it was interesting to try. Anyhow.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to learn Chinese, and it's face to face, but I think my age is going against me. Like I said, I do know how to speak enough to eat, but that's so maybe the online medium would do a better job. Related to what you're saying, actually, I sort of want to take you to my last question, because I know I'm taking a little bit more of your time than I should. But so I'm looking at the article that you co-authored. Actually, not you co-authored, but I'm looking at another article that was written in terms of the research areas that are most critical and urgent in our field. And I think ONSU 2011 sort of indicated 4 areas. One is enhancing learner engagement and collaboration. That's one area. The other is promoting effective facilitation. And then the third one is developing assessment techniques. And the fourth one is designing faculty development programs. Now, I'm not like super excited by these areas of research. I need to hear something new, because I've heard these, I'm not a researcher in the field, although I write about it from a pedagogical standpoint, but I need to hear something more exciting than these areas. Have you heard of those areas? Are you thinking of those areas, or are your students coming up with, interesting perspectives on research?
Yeah, the faculty development question has been an annual thing since the 1950s. I think if we haven't answered that question by now, the federal government should stop giving any money to anybody asking for we just need a little more training. If we don't have a model that's effective for training, and Thomas Guskey at Kentucky probably has the best answers in terms of models for faculty training, systemic kinds of models for faculty development and training. As a facilitation, when my former student Vanessa Denon, now at Florida State, gave a talk at that Wisconsin Distance Teaching and Learning Conference in 2001 or 2002, I expected nobody to show up. I figured we had that answered already. No problem. We know that people came by the dozens. I mean, they were bringing in chairs to the room. We probably had 200 people in the room. We expected maybe 10 or 20 would show up. And these doctors who are teaching are taking copious notes on how to teach online, how to facilitate, and how to moderate, and all these kinds of things. It led to a paper I wrote on how to moderate online, and Vanessa's written much more than I have on this. So Vanessa, if you want to look at, her dissertation was all about that back in the late 90s.
What was her last name?
Denon, D-E-N-N-E-N. She's now one of the editors of Ed Researcher magazine, and as well as the Internet and Higher Education. She's the co-editor of the Internet and Higher Education, or editor-in-chief. So her name's out there a bit in different things. She almost did this book. We were supposed to do this one together, but she ended up becoming an editor of that book for me. And so she's quite good. So if you're looking at that area, facilitation, there are people that have devoted their lives. Julie Salmon in the UK has a book on e-moderating and e-activities. She's not necessarily a researcher per se. She's more of a big picture kind of person, thinking about all these changes.
Yeah, I just want to think about something new,
Something new. Okay.
For me, it's just, online teaching is exciting. Teaching is exciting. Yeah. But what are the exciting new, where no man or woman have gone to before?
Yeah, well, what I've been looking at the last couple of years has been self-directed online learning environments, which we're starting to get more attention on. Can we train self-directed learning skills? And my guess is 25% of the population has self-directed learning skills, how can we get the other 75%? Because that's an untapped human potential then of people that could utilize all this free content that's available. If they don't have the skills to utilize it, the motivation to utilize it, the time management to utilize it, then we're wasting America's talent and the world's talent, and not having the programs out there to retrain. So that's one area, self-directed online learning and understanding it better. The second area I'm looking at is cultural sensitivity. And if we're creating courses that have people coming from more than 100 countries, and people have different expectations, different religious backgrounds, different expectations in terms of how the course is organized even, and what the goals might be and when to participate, how to participate. How do we become sensitive to people in terms of even how I dressed today? You know, I was just sent something to Ivy Tech here for a talk they're asking me to do, and I have a picture where I'm going like pointing, and I sent them that, and I'm like, well, that might work in Indiana, but this might not work real well in Malaysia, where you're from, or some other countries, okay?
I don't think here it would work either if you point your finger at me.
Sorry.
In this day and age, in this day, you know.
So you know, the world is open.
Yeah, I like that one. I like that one. I like that picture.
So, you know, you have to be sensitive in how you are conducting these courses. So cultural sensitivity on the part of the instructor, as well as the students, have to be given some kind of cultural sensitivity trainings or expectations. And so I think that's an area that's not necessarily unexplored, but underexplored. So that's both areas have been explored to some degree, but both are underexplored. The third is personalization. And I mean, personalization is an overused term, and it's an misunderstood term. But I think better understanding of how we might be able to provide the pathways, the contents, and the collaborative teams even for people so they can, you know, I think a real interesting area as part of that is how do we get these people in online environments with other team members that, you know, how do you facilitate that if you've got a large class? How do you get that effective? How do you provide the support structures? I think another area that's been around for a long time is the scaffolding of students, the support structures that we put into place for effective functioning. I think we really have to change the notion of the instructor. And I like the word assister of the learning process. We probably can't change the name to assister, but a concierge, a curator, a counselor, a consultant, a coach, all these C words out there. And so I think one area is a better understanding of the roles that we can take into place. I think that 2002 article talked about the 4 roles of the online instructor. The instructor, you know, wears 4 hats: the social hat, the pedagogical hat, the managerial hat, and the technological hat. Well, that's expanded since 2002 to a huge degree. And so I think an area that we need to really take a serious look at is what do people see as their role as a person who's teaching online? Does it vary from high content introductory courses to more seminar, webinar kinds of courses? Does that role dramatically change or vary? And students, and if students are coming to college having had high school classes online, are their roles different than the students who are coming to college who never had an online experience before? That might also be a value and an interest, because today the state of Michigan, state of Florida, state of Idaho, and other places are mandating high school students take at least one online class. Does that help acclimate them to the expectations when they come into higher ed or beyond?
Right.
So those are 4 areas that I see as important.
Areas, yeah. I mean, faculty now, I mean, I'm on a job search committee, and, you know, for the next, whoever is the next person, you know, has to have online teaching experience. I mean, that was for me, you know, 13 years ago when I joined the faculty, you know, I've always had a blended load. And so, you know, I mean, it's
yeah,
you know,
it has changed. So when I started in '89, that was not listed at all. It was not even thought about. You know, the first fully online class was taught in 1985 in University of Toronto, but we, you know, and I think I knew of it, and I was researching online collaborative tools back in the 1990, 91, 92. We were experimenting. 93, I did my first blended course. 97, I did my first fully online course. So 20 years ago.
1997?
No, I first online. Yeah. And Jack Cummings did the first one in EdPsych where I was. He did it in 96 and then told me I could do it. He had 7 students and he nearly died, he told me. And then I had 20. I said, Jack, wait a minute, this got 20. You nearly died with 7. He said, well, you can do it, water boy, you can do it. Blended learning since 93. And so I did it and I nearly died. And then I did it another time with 30 the next semester, and it was easy. It was just the first time teaching that way. It was really hard.
Yeah.
You learn. You know.
Yeah, I remember teaching the first time online. The problem I guess it was, well, 13 years ago, 2014. No, is that correct? Not, but anyway, 2004, and it was the infrastructure. I had to build it all, because there was no support infrastructure, and that was the most frustrating thing at the very beginning.
Oh, in 2003, that 13 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah,
so,
that's that. You know, and the problem is we've changed from OnCourse to Canvas and other things. Zoom, we're using here Zoom. What a wonderful tool this would have been 20 years ago. This is so convenient, you know. So the technologies have become a bit easier. They've also become a little bit more complicated when you have computer programmers that say, oh, this would be a cool tool to add. Canvas is loaded with lots of free stuff.
Right.
That I, just stay away from for now and stay with the, simple things that work for the most part. But
Right. Yeah, one of the things to remember is that, we may have everything available to us in this environment, but that's not the case with the students that we have everywhere, or our colleagues. So it's been an hour, Curt. I'm the one who's been asking all the questions. So is there anything that you want to sort of share with us that you think is critical, that you want to sort of bring a closure to this conversation, which is actually quite fun?
So, I think we're in an age where learning is changing, and we have to start realizing that people are learning today more in visual formats. People are learning today in more collaborative and mobile formats. People are learning today in more blended and online formats. People are learning today in more competency-based educational formats. So, learning's changing, and I've got an article.
Explain that last point, the competency-based.
Yeah, this is competency-based. If people know the content already, why are we making them sit through it, and for so many hours of wasting their life? We can be expediting the learning process a little better by being aware of pre-existing knowledge that our students have coming in the door. And some places like Wisconsin are developing degree programs that are more competency-based, that you take a test. If you have this content knowledge, you should be able to get credit for what you know. So I think access to education, as we all know, will continue to accelerate. And so every wall, every bus stop, every cafe, there'll be learning nuggets and components available for us. And we're in the midst of what I call the learning century today. And it's becoming increasingly more obvious. But I've tried to take the 30 ways that I see learning changing, and I've come up with 10 that are more about engagement, 10 that are more about access, and 10 that are more about personalization or customization. I've written it. You can download this paper for free. It's called, What is the State of eLearning? Remember that question you asked me earlier in New Zealand? What's the state of eLearning? I said I can't answer that. Well, I actually have written a paper that does answer your earlier question, and it will become a book. My next book project, I'll have a couple chapters related to all this. Subtitle is Reflections on 30 Ways Learning is Changing, based on my keynote in New Zealand 16 years after I was on national television in New Zealand. They brought me back because they said you had no answer for us in 2002. In fact, at that same conference, they lined up the keynotes at the end and had us tell, what is the state of e-learning? At that same conference, after I flubbed national television, they put me on national radio. And the first thing they asked me is, on national radio, what's the state of e-learning? It was like this thing. Lord of the Rings had happened in New Zealand. Known for Lord of the Rings. They wanted to be known for e-learning in New Zealand. Okay? So what's the state of e-learning 14 years later? You can download this article for free off my homepage. You go to publicationshare.com or go to Bonk.com and find my articles. But I wrote this for the journal called FLANS, which is the Journal of Open, Flexible, and Distance Learning in New Zealand. And
what year was that?
That was last year, I think it came out, and I wrote it about a year and a half ago. So it's still pretty current. It goes through the 30 ways, like I just mentioned. Learning's more free and open, formal.
I like the title, 30 Ways.
Yeah, what is the state of e-learning? 30 reflections on 30 ways learning is changing. And so, that would be the one thing I think if I want you to take something away, you can get this book for free, sure, that, can teach with this. But I think this book will get you thinking a little bit more about the big picture. This article will get you thinking about the big picture of how all of our lives are changing. When Faridah and I, Dr. Pawan and I decided to become PhDs at some point in our lives, these things were not on the top of our radar. All of you have a chance today to be immersed in dozens of ways that young people, old people, middle-aged people's lives are changing today. More experienced, I should have said, people. All of our lives are changing and are being impacted by LCLE. They're being impacted by IST, where I am now, in ways that we hadn't envisioned when we were in graduate school. You have so many possible dissertation questions you can ask today, or research questions if you're getting your master's, or just action-based research that, you know, you're going to have to almost stop yourself from asking. You just write one down, a couple down, and pursue it. But it's an exciting time. These are really exciting times. I'm happy to come into your class and do some Q&A with all of you, maybe later in the semester. I have a couple conferences coming up, which made it a little difficult for me to come in now, and that's why we're doing this podcast now. I love podcasts. I much prefer it live. So I will try and find a way to sneak into your classroom for at least a short Q&A, if not a short presentation on the 30 ways learning is changing. But I'll talk to your professor and we'll figure that out. Thank you.
We'll figure that out when you come back. Are you going to be, so probably toward the end of the semester, that will be fun.
Yeah, I have more time definitely at the end of the semester. If you're still doing things in early December, I also may have time right before Thanksgiving. So the week before Thanksgiving, I have an opening there, so we can talk about that. Okay.
Sure. This is great, Curt. And, you know, this is enjoyable. I wish we could do this a little bit longer, but this is fun. This is getting right to the heart of the matter. So I do appreciate you taking the time this late in the day.
Sure.
So thank you again, Curt.
Sure, no problem.
I do have to say that students might be accumulating questions, and when they do, I hope to be able to send them to you, and if you could respond at your convenience, that would be great.
No problem.
Okay.
I'd love to answer anybody's questions.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.